Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a great discussion with Larson from Firefly Home Care. Thank you so much for joining us today, Larson.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
it's great to see you. Recently, I attended a lot of conferences and sort of breakout sessions that talked about, I would argue, the hottest topic in home care right now, which is artificial intelligence. And I was a little concerned about the focus of those topics and that they didn't really give a full picture about what it's like to use AI day to day and also things that people should be concerned about. So that's why we're going to have this discussion today. But before we get too deep into any of that, Larson, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about who you are, your agency, and what you love about home care.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm Larson Manifold. I'm the owner of Firefly Home Care. My wife Amy and I started the agency in 2012 as a non-medical home care agency. Some things led up to that, personal experiences, professional experiences that ultimately led us to home care. And then I guess it was in 2016, I think, we launched a separate agency for regulatory purposes called Firefly Home Health. So that's a home health care agency. And then most recently, I have partnered with a local physician on a geriatric care management agency called First Call Care Management. So it's been a sort of a long time coming for my ultimate vision of being able to provide a very comprehensive in-home care solution for clients and their families in our community. So love being able to just give back to the community, help people that are in need. It's challenging as any home care agency, I think, will attest to. It can be a grind sometimes, but ultimately the reward is well worth it. Just happy to be here and really blessed and honored to have the opportunity to own and operate a home care agency. It's been great.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's dive into our discussion about AI. So it is, pretty much on everybody's minds, I would say. There's a lot of articles that people put out. Again, there's a lot of breakout sessions at conferences, and they talk about how kind of AI is changing everything. But they don't really get into the details about what does it look like day to day? What can people use that to like apply to their businesses? And I know you've done a lot of investigation into AI and how you might be able to utilize that in your home care industry, in home care agency, and also kind of the things to be concerned about, like how to make sure that client data isn't being exposed to ChatGPT, which is one of the AI tools that we'll talk about. So if you could just, tell me a little bit about what that journey has been like for you and what you've used it for and what you might want to tell agencies about AI.
Yeah. So it's been a little bit of an evolution, my experience and my relationship, I guess, if you will, with AI. I still think that there's a lot of opportunity, and I think we've only, we're at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to AI. We've just scratched the surface. I would say that probably in the beginning, I was a little overly optimistic about AI and what it can do for our agency. It's an amazing technology, no question about that. I continue to be blown away by some of the things that come out of AI. But sort of, I guess I would describe that journey as um, coming to a realization, more of a realization about some of the challenges. And it really boils down to the practical application of AI in our business when we talk about it in the business context. We can, get into some more details about that, but um, I guess I could start with a use case.
That'd be great.
One of the biggest challenges for us as a home care agency is scheduling. And so that's naturally one of the first places I started with AI. And based on the great conversations I was having with ChatGPT on a variety of different topics, I just started with, hey, I'm going to take our client and caregiver schedule. I'm going to de-identify it so we don't have to share any kind of HIPAA information. I'm going to feed ChatGPT that schedule and just say, hey, make this more efficient, work this out. And that was my first sore disappointment in AI that unfortunately you have to give it a little more structure. You have to build a model for AI to work appropriately. So it's not just as easy as saying, hey, export all the shifts in Rosemark, maybe address these open shifts, look at caregivers' schedules, and do something with this. You have to be much more deliberate and structured with AI. So that was kind of the first clue to me that there was going to be more upfront work and input required to make AI ultimately usable. So I still don't have any positive necessarily use cases on actually having AI do scheduling for us. Um, but I do have an example of something that I'm actually working on today. I was working on this before we spoke and not in preparation of the interview. It just happened to come up today.
Mhm.
We track we call it staff utilization. So we look at essentially how many hours a week do caregivers want to work? And we compare that to how many hours a week are they actually working? And that becomes a percentage. And so we're either underutilized, our staff is underutilized, meaning they have more capacity than what we're able to give them. That is more the exception and not the rule. We can be right kind of in the sweet spot of utilization. For us, that is 85%. Not to dig into the details of it, but that's about where we've decided, hey, that's a pretty sweet spot. People are reasonably scheduled, but they do have some capacity to take on open shifts or new cases, whatever. Or we could be overscheduled. We can run above 100%, meaning that people are working more than they really want to be working. And so we track all of that ultimately it's an Excel spreadsheet. And up until this point, it's been a very manual process where we have to pull data from different areas of Rosemark. We have to put that into a spreadsheet that has a lot of different formulas in it. And ultimately, it will give us a utilization at a caregiver level and then at an agency level. And we do that across multiple weeks. And so that takes a lot of time and data manipulation to put that information in there. So one of the more recent use cases I've been working on is, can we just pull the individual files or the data out of Rosemark that we need, spit it into ChatGPT is the model that I've been working with, or the technology I've been working with, I guess, and then have it do the busy work of plugging everything into the right places in that staff utilization report without breaking anything or hallucinating or doing anything crazy. I think I have a model built. It probably took me, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours of conversation back and forth with chat and putting information in. It will create something. I review that, realize there's an error, trying to prompt it in a correct way to spit out essentially what we're looking for. So I think I have that model built. I haven't done extensive testing on it, but that would be more of a positive use case where we have used AI to produce something that's useful and functional in our agency.
That's a great example. And in fact, I want to go back a little bit to what you mentioned about hallucinating, because that's one of the things that I think people need to be aware of is that ChatGPT and other AI models can produce incorrect information. It can produce false information, essentially. Now, it's not lying necessarily, because I think you have to have an intent to lie, but it is information that's just inaccurate, but it will be presented as though it's accurate. And I think it's important for people to know that that's possible and to review the information that they're getting back for accuracy. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's one of the points that just doesn't get mentioned very much. And I think it's important, because if you just accept what's given to you by ChatGPT, it can be incorrect.
There's
Um,
definitely human management and oversight still needed. It is not fully automated. It is not fully intelligent. um,
Not quite yet.
yeah. So, and I could foresee with this positive use case that I just described that potentially over time something could break, and that can be dangerous because in the beginning of this model, if it's working properly and we take that at face value that, hey, this is working and it's giving us the expected information, and then maybe a month, 2 months, sometime down the road, we feed it everything that we've always done in the past, but for some reason something changes,
Mhm.
that could lead to inaccurate results. And depending on what data you're working with, it could be, potentially harmful to the business. We're in the human care industry, and so it could be potentially harmful to, a person.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's very important that people regularly check on that information. And like you said, things could be running great for a month, for 2 months, but unless you stay rigorous about checking that information, you can have potentially very dangerous consequences. And that's something I wish people talked about a little bit more. And that's part of the reason I'm so glad you could join us today, because that's real life, day-to-day use of AI that people can relate to and understand how it's both beneficial and potentially problematic if it's not closely watched. And I think you're right. I think it's going to change over time and become more effective and more useful. But that kind of evolution takes time. And I think we're right to be excited about it, but maybe to be cautious as well.
Mhm.
Is there any other cases that you are excited about, or anything that you'd want to tell agencies to be careful about if they're interested and want to start kind of exploring AI in their own home care agency?
So I guess one of the things that comes to mind is just the um, how do we build a model in AI that is actually useful? In my case, like I said, with the utilization, that probably I'm going to estimate, let's just say it took me 4 hours to build the model, right? That doesn't mean that now I necessarily have an easy button that I can hit and I can make everything work. I still have to pull information out of Rosemark. I have to de-identify information that I am putting into ChatGPT. So there's definitely still manual work involved in that. Um, it's saving me time in terms of manual data aggregation, I guess, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, but then we talked about the need to review that data and make sure it's, accurate. And then in reality, that's still just data, right? Now we actually have to do something with that data. We have to, in the case of a staff utilization report, okay, so we're at 75%. What does that mean? So we're at 110%. What does that mean? And what are we actually going to do about that as an agency? And I think that's where I maybe was hallucinating a little bit about AI in the beginning, that I thought it was going to be this massive time saver, this panacea that would just solve all of our problems. And the reality of the situation is it can be a time saver, but it doesn't really solve our problems. And I don't even see right now a use case or a situation where I could even think about reducing my staff by even a half of an FTE because of what we've been able to do with AI so far. So
Mhm.
I think, one, I guess, suggestion, or I would encourage agency owners to just be realistic about what is AI, what do you want out of AI, and realistically, what is it going to do for you and your agency? Can it save some time? Yes. Can it aggregate things more efficiently than maybe a human can? Sure, it's great at summaries and aggregation and things like that. But I personally don't see a situation right now where we could even think about reducing, staff overhead or payroll because of AI. So I guess just be realistic.
I think that's great advice, and I think it'll be helpful for people as this kind of whole situation, I guess, evolves. And really, I think it's helpful to think about it as a tool set. This is a set of tools that's at its infancy, really, and eventually it'll become more robust, like all other tools that we invent, I suppose, over time. But right now, being realistic, I think, is great advice. Thank you, Larson. And thank you so much for talking a little bit about, what you've experienced and your day-to-day trying to integrate these tools into your life. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we wrap it
There
up?
was one other thing that came to mind, and you had actually
Mm,
shared this with me previously after the recent conference you were at.
mm,
You were talking a little bit about how you had gone to some presentations about AI,
mhm,
and it was marketed as this amazing AI tool. And as you sat there listening to what was actually happening, you were telling yourself, well, this isn't AI. These are basic functions and basic formulas that could be carried out in a spreadsheet or some other way that's just basic computing. I've actually experienced that as well. So
yeah,
there
right.
are um, there was one use case, and I'm trying to remember what it is. It'll probably come to me. That
Mm,
I thought, you know what, this is a manual process. I'm going to feed it into chat, and we'll see if we can, speed this up, basically. And at
mhm,
the end of the day, it was more trouble to try to get or AI to do the work
Mhm.
for me, as opposed to just putting a few formulas in an Excel spreadsheet and analyzing it that way.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of hype around AI. What is AI really? And when a software company says we have AI now, that's not necessarily, they may, I guess they're not lying, I don't know, but it's not necessarily anything beyond what we can do today. I'll close with the classic example. I was super excited to get the new iPhone, and I
Mhm.
got an iPhone 16, and that opens up Apple Intelligence. And I was so excited about AI bringing that on. I had been thinking about, man, I can't wait for the day that I can use AI in my day-to-day life and on my phone, for example. And so finally, I got the iPhone 16, and I opted into the Apple Intelligence program. And it's been nothing but a downward sort of, not spiral, but in the beginning, I was super excited about it. Now I'm like, it kind of summarizes my text messages for me, and I'm not even really that happy with the summary anyway, because there's details in there that it's missing. It's
Yeah.
doing its job. It's not like it was false advertising, but same with email summaries. There's some things that you can go into the Photos app, and supposedly it could grab photos and create a memories um,
Oh, wow.
reel for you or something like that. Well, remember, before Apple Intelligence, there was already a memories reel. It came up on your phone.
That's
It would
true.
say, here's some memories that you might be interested in.
Yeah.
I tried to actually make something specifically, it was for my son's football team, a highlight reel from one of his games. Unusable. It couldn't grab the video data and put it together in a usable format. And so I ended up pitching it and just doing it manually before. So I'm not knocking Apple, iPhone, AI, any of that. It's just the realization that sometimes this is marketed a little more heavily than um, what you can practically use. At least that's been my experience.
That is a great point to bring up because I 100% agree. I think there's a lot of excitement around the term AI, but I do think it gets, we'll say, applied to things that might not necessarily be like a language model, or in some cases, I think they have image models, things like that. It's more of standard computing that's just operating at a very high level. And it can feel like it's artificial intelligence, but in reality, it's just very high level computing that we already have available. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I'd honestly forgotten about that part of it. I was so concerned about like, please don't put HIPAA data into ChatGPT. That was my huge concern at the beginning. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I think over time it will maybe be applied to more actual artificial intelligence, but I think right now people are just very excited about it. So AI gets used a lot.
Hmm.
It's used a
It's a
lot.
buzzword.
It's a
Yep.
buzzword. That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, wonderful. I really appreciate your time, Larson. I think it's just wonderful to hear from an agency owner who's looked into this and tried to use it in their day to day and experienced a little bit of joy and a little bit of disappointment. And that's, a more realistic approach to everything we're hearing about the buzzword of AI. So thank you again for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks again for having me.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.